Hi everyone, Christina here. Welcome to another card video at my YouTube channel and blog. The design for today's card is inspired by these two little images that are in a stamp set from Paper Smooches. The stamp set is called Courteous Cuties, and I love that little bee image. So I thought it'd be fun to create kind of a honeycomb pattern on some watercolor paper. And the watercolor paper I'm going to be using today is from Fabriano. This is some extra white Artistico cotton cold pressed watercolor paper. It's a great watercolor paper. So I didn't have any kind of honeycomb patterns that I liked in a stamp or die form. So I created this printout. You can get it over at my blog. It's a PDF download. Print it out on some regular computer paper, and then you can hold it up to the light, get your watercolor paper positioned just right, and then tape it down on one side. This is so you can flip over that watercolor paper. And we're going to apply some pencil to the back of that printout. So you just want to use a regular pencil. I would suggest using like a regular number 2 pencil or something like that. Now, as I kind of scribble over the back of this, it's picking up that grid pattern from my cutting mat, but that shouldn't be a problem. You really just want that graphite from the pencil to be all over the pattern where that honeycomb pattern is. So you're going to swing that back over, tape it in place, and then flip everything back over. Now you're going to take a pencil, or you can use a pen for this part, and you're going to go over all of those lines that are on the printout. And that's going to transfer the graphite that you've scribbled on the back of the printout to the watercolor paper. So I'm going to flip this over just to make sure that it's transferring. You can see it's a very faint line, but it's transferring that pattern onto the watercolor paper. So if you wanted to, you could definitely draw your own honeycomb pattern like this, but I wanted mine to be fairly precise, even though I'm going to watercolor and it's going to look a little more freehand. I wanted it to be pretty precise, and I thought this would help me get all my lines perfect. This is a great way if you want to transfer any other type of drawing, or if you want to have a stamped image but you want it in very, very faint pencil, you could do the same idea. Stamp the image onto some thin computer paper, scribble on the back, and then go over those lines on top of the stamped image, and then it will transfer the graphite. So you can definitely do that with other types of images. So I've taped my watercolor piece down to a board here, and I'm going to be using some Mission Gold watercolors from Magello. And I'm going to tip up my board here, so I'm putting a roll of tape back there and then putting my board on top. And I thought I would show you how I created a nice golden color for all my watercoloring. So this yellow straight from the palette is fairly bright. It's a little too bright for what I was thinking of today. So I'm actually going to get a pool of that yellow paint going. Then I'm going to grab some purple. Now purple is the complementary color to yellow, so it's going to tone it back just a little bit. And if you want more info about using complementary colors to mix custom colors, I'll have a link up in the top corner to a video I did this past spring where it explains all about using complementary colors to mix your own custom colors. It's a great video and a lot of you really loved it. So if you want to view that for the first time, or kind of study up on the whole concept once more, you can watch that video. So I started out by putting a very, very faint yellow base color on. I just used a lot of water and a little bit of that gold color. And then I dropped in some of that full strength gold color and let it kind of spread out from the bottom of that hexagon shape. And I'm going to do that for the rest of the hexagons. And the thing that I'm doing to make sure that I don't have any of these kind of bleed into each other is I'm moving around the piece so none of them are touching. And then I let it dry. And then I came in with another round, skipping ones that were touching each other until I was able to paint in the entire piece. Now this very last one, I finished that, and then I realized there was a faint one over there on the left. So I did go over that again with a second layer and added a little more of that golden color. So now I'm going to use these Starry Night kind of pearlescent colors from Kuretake Zig. This is from the Gansai Tambi Starry Colors palette. I'm going to use a gold shade, and I'm going to do almost the exact same technique. I'm putting down some clean, clear water, and then I'll pick up some of the gold shade. It's a really, really nice gold shade, and I'll drop that in onto the bottom of the hexagon. You can see that that pearlescent watercolor just sort of starts to spread out, and that's the exact look that I was going for. So I'm going to actually tip this upside down because I do want those colors to kind of fade down from that side of the hexagon. And I'm going to let gravity help me out here because remember my board is tipped up on that roll of tape. So I'm letting gravity pull that gold shimmer watercolor down to the other side of each hexagon. So this gold shade, you really can see it really well when you tip it in the light. It's going to look a little funny sometimes when it's not quite in the light, but it's beautiful and gorgeous when it's there. So I'm going to erase any of those pencil lines. You notice that I didn't paint all the way up to the edge of those pencil lines, and that's because I knew I would eventually want to erase them. So I'm using a kneaded eraser. This is a really soft moldable eraser that's great for erasing really soft graphite pencil lines. And I'll have it linked down in the video description or with the supplies if you want to check one of those erasers out. So now I'm going to take those two images that I showed you before, the little bee and the Be Well Soon greeting. And I'm using a MISTI stamping positioning tool to position those stamps, and then I'm going to stamp them using some VersaFine Onyx Black ink. And because I'm stamping over the top of watercolor, and particularly over that pearlescent metallic watercolor from the Gansai Tambi Starry Night palette, I'm going to stamp these images 3 times. And each time I load up the stamp and then stamp it down, it's going to stamp in the exact same position. And using a MISTI stamp positioning tool makes this part process seamless and super easy to do. So if you don't have a MISTI or a different other type of stamping positioning tool like this, it's a really great investment and it can really add to the precise nature of your card making. So I'm going to use a border stamp from the Simon Says Stamp Artful Border Stamp Set. I'm using that kind of more narrow 3-lined border. I'm lining that up in the bottom of my panel here. And then I'm going to once again stamp this in some Onyx Black VersaFine ink. Now this very solid line really didn't want to stamp over the textured watercolor paper and over all that pearlescent watercolor. So I did stamp this actually 4 times in order to get it to show up really nice and stark and solid. So now that I have that piece pretty much done, I'm just going to start adding some finishing touches. So I was going to leave the bee exactly the way it was, and you definitely could, but then I decided at the last minute to just add a tiny bit of like a tinted shade to the actual bee itself. So I put a little bit of a light gray on his face and then added some yellow to the actual body of the bee. The card base I'm using today is made out of some Basil Licorice Twist cardstock, and I used my Score Pal tool to score that at 5.5. I then cut down my watercolor panel so that it was 4 inches wide by 5 1/4 tall, so it is just a little bit smaller than the size of a standard size card. Put some foam tape on the back of that watercolor panel, and then press that down directly onto the front of my card. To finish this off, I added a few little sequins, and I'm using my tweezers from EK Success and also a bottle of Ranger Multimedia Matte with a precision tip on top to adhere these. And I don't recall the exact sequins that I'm using, but I'll link to some yellow sequins down in the supplies section so you can check that out if you're looking for some yellow sequins. So that is the card for today. I love how it turned out. That gold shimmer from the Starry Night palette works so well on these yellow honeycomb pentagons, or hexagons actually. Thanks so much for watching today. I will catch you guys in another video very, very soon.